They've released 17 studio albums, resulting in over 200 million albums sold worldwide, including Back in Black, selling 50 million albums worldwide, making it the highest-selling album in rock history, with sold-out stadiums, arenas, and concert venues over the last 40 years. And their latest album, Power Up, released in late 2020, AC/DC remains one of the greatest rock bands in the world, and we're going to talk about it. This is For Those About to Talk, the AC/DC podcast, with your hosts Eddie Payne and Tommy Pearson.
And welcome back to For Those About to Talk, the AC/DC podcast. I'm your host, Eddie Payne, and along in the next room is Tommy Pearson.
Episode 2, here we go.
Episode 2, that's right. And we're going to talk today a little bit about the influences that AC/DC has had on other bands and the style of music. They're pretty much basically just a blues band, blues rock.
Very heavy blues band, really. All the way back to the first album, you can hear that influence. And if you've ever read interviews with Angus about his lead style, he openly admits it. And he'll tell you that the stuff that he used to like when he was a kid, he used to listen to Big Bill Bluesy and Hubert Sumlin, and I mean the original blues guys prior to Clapton and all the second guys, second wave that came out of England in the 60s. He was listening to the real deal from the 30s and 40s. He's the youngest of 7 or 8 kids or something, and all his older brothers played, and they had records laying around, and that stuff got into it. Their very first single in Australia was a cover of the song "Baby Please Don't Go" by Big Bill Bluesy, and I mean, of course, they rocked the hell out of it, but it was still that's a blues song. Ted Nugent's done a cover of it. A million people have done a cover of it, but that's where they're coming from.
Yeah, and I've honestly never really been a big blues fan. I mean, there's some guys out there that that are really bluesy in their style and playing, and I just have never been into it. I mean, I can't really get into like the straight up 12-bar blues that everybody knows how to play and can play with their eyes shut or whatever.
Yeah,
but I think the way AC/DC does it, it's a little different. They incorporate more of a classic style into it rather than just your straight up blues. I mean, you can even pick it out in the way Angus solos.
Absolutely.
Does his leads and stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, their songs, I mean, you can't say a song like, Ball Breaker or Thunderstruck or, Girls Got Rhythm. None of that is a blues progression song. But the solos, if you lifted those solos out and put them in a 12-bar blues, they would fit. I mean, you take a solo off an AC/DC song that happens to be an A, put it over an A 12-bar, and it'll work. And Angus has said that his style comes from that stuff. He, in all the years that I've loved this band, he has rarely acknowledged liking any other guitar players. I mean, he's kind of cagey about that. He doesn't really want to say, yeah, my favorite was Albert King, and then you go, oh yeah, well I hear all these Albert King licks in his stuff. So he would never say that. I've heard him say that he likes Eric Clapton okay. He doesn't rave over him. He says he's okay. He loves Chuck Berry, but Chuck Berry was a rock and roll guitar player, if not the first rock and roll guitar player. And Angus cites him as being a guy that he really, really admired.
That doesn't show at all.
Yeah. No duck walking or anything like that. But he's acknowledged. I mean, I've got set lists that they played from, before they had a record contract back in Australia when they had Dave Evans singing for them, or even before that. And they played Stones songs and blues songs and Yardbirds and things like that. So it makes sense that's where his style would have come from. But when they got into the full swing of things, probably beyond, maybe by the Highway to Hell album, you didn't hear as many straight blues-based songs on their records. But you go back to High Voltage. This song on there called "Little Lover." It sounds like a country blues song, and then you can move forward from there and go into go into Let There Be Rock. I mean, that's got songs that are straight up 1-4-5. I'm sorry, I'm talking guitar terms here for you guys. A song like Go Down is a straight 1-4-5 type of progression. Even Bad Boy Boogie is a straight 1-4-5 type of progression. If you took off the dan 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 riff, if you took that off of it, they're just going from A to D to E, which is a blues progression. So any kind of blues soloing over top of that is going to work. AC/DC just happens to play it with a hell of a lot of enthusiasm.
Well, I was just actually going to say, from a listener standpoint, if you weren't a musician and you were just listening to AC/DC just off the radio or off the CD or whatever, some good songs that remind me of a traditional blues song would be one like The Jack.
The Jack, for sure, yeah.
You had mentioned Bad Boy Boogie. There's a little bit of blues feel in there. Rock and Roll Ain't Noise Pollution's another one.
Yep.
And then you've got Night Prowler. That is a very, very bluesy song.
Very bluesy solos to it. All the guitar fills and stuff. Very, very slow minor blues kind of feel to that song for sure.
Yep.
And going back off the let's see, what album is this going to be on? Dirty Deeds. Off the Dirty Deeds album, they had a song called Ride On. Very, very slow blues thing. It sounds just like ZZ Top's Jesus Just Left Chicago. And it makes me wonder, did AC/DC hear that and write their song, or did ZZ Top hear the AC/DC song? Because they're very, very similar. But it's kind of turned down. It's got a bluesman's type of lyrical sensibility to it from Bon Scott, about being lonely on the road and about, drinking too much and where's his life going to go. He's going to change his evil ways one of these days, that kind of thing, with a lot of really bluesy soloing from Angus. It's just a laid back, 2 a.m. riding down the highway kind of blues song.
And I've noticed also, just watching concerts, because I've never actually had the luxury of seeing AC/DC play live, and, it kind of sucks, but
you will.
I've noticed that, just from watching the videos, the way that Angus plays, I mean, he just does it so effortlessly in his leads, and you can tell it's not really that complicated for a guitar player to do that, but if you can do that, I mean, it's a pretty cool thing to pull that off.
Yeah, he does.
Stage.
He sticks to the blues pretty much, major or minor pentatonic blues, but he throws in some spicy licks here and there, and coming all the way forward, I mean, you can hear the blues on certain songs, like on Ball Breaker and Stiff Upper Lip. Stiff Upper Lip, the main riff to that song is a very bluesy style riff. The main little pull off riff on the newest album from Shot in the Dark, very bluesy little riff. I mean, there's probably, I'll bet you if you listen to every single album, there's a song on there that even the main riffs are rooted in the blues for sure.
And another thing, also from a listener standpoint, and just something that I've picked up over the years, is the way that Phil Rudd plays these songs. I mean, if anybody else had played them, it wouldn't have the same feel. Phil Rudd's got that certain swing, and that's why some of these songs like The Jack or Rock and Roll Ain't Noise Pollution are going to have that bluesy feel, because he sticks to the song and he plays off of the rhythm.
Everybody in AC/DC, everybody that's ever recorded with them or toured with them on any instrument, bass, drums, guitar, you name it, bagpipes, they've all been masters of restraint. I mean, Lord knows Phil Rudd can play. He just plays what's for the song, and he does have that swing that you're talking about. You listen to his hi-hat and work, and then you listen to where he plays behind the beat on the kick drum and the snare a lot, and it gives the song kind of a push and pull. On the early records, when they all recorded in one room together, you can hear them speed up the choruses and then lay back on the verses. You can hear them hit the guitar strings harder on the choruses and then lay back during the verses. And then when the solos come around, it's like they're trying to destroy the room. That's the whole band. Angus is soloing, but Malcolm and Mark Evans or Cliff Williams and Phil Rudd, they put a hell of a lot behind Angus when he's soloing. They bear down on it, and you can hear that. And that's another trademark of the blues. You got to know how to be dynamic. You have to know how to push it and be loud, and you have to know how to show some restraint. And those guys are masters.
Yeah, I'm not sure if those guys used a metronome or a click track back in those days, or if they had something to start on. I don't know if they, I'm not too familiar with the studio process that far back.
I would bet all the Bon Scott material they didn't. They may have used a click track on certain songs, but you can definitely hear the push and pull from verse to chorus and back. Or, if you listen to one of my favorites, the Let There Be Rock album, you listen to every song on that, and it definitely sounds like it's the whole band in the room playing together. Probably in isolated rooms or with plexi with the drum cages and stuff up, but. It definitely sounds like the whole band is in one room together because you can hear the intensity. And pretty much every song on that album, I guarantee if you put a metronome on it at the beginning of the song and then maybe the last verse or the last chorus or the fade out, you'd probably get two different tempos.
Right. Yeah, it's very hard to, if you were to go and try to put a metronome on it now, it just wouldn't. Wouldn't line up. I mean,
but that's intentional too.
Yeah,
I mean, those guys, they went for feel. I don't know how many takes they must have had to do of each song. I mean, they're a well-oiled machine. Probably not many, but it was about the feel for them. So if it sped up throughout the song, or if the chorus sped up, or there's a bum note here or there. They left it in, man. They went. That's the track. That's the cut right there.
Yeah.
Cut number 5 is the one that we want to put on the record, and you couldn't talk them out of it, man. They were just gonna. If that's the one that had the feel, then that's the one that went on the record.
Yeah, definitely. And I've noticed, like for example, if you take the album version of "Let There Be Rock" and then watch the "Let There Be Rock" from the Live at River Plate live concert. It must be like 10 to 15 BPMs faster.
No doubt.
On a concert. I'm like, because Phil doesn't even play eighth notes like he does on the album. And it's so fast. He just like, fuck it, I'm just going to play quarter notes. And he's got the cigarette hanging out of his mouth. He's like, and he's super fast. I don't know if he was coked up that day or what, but it's just.
I've in biographies that I've read about that song, about "Let There Be Rock," Phil's well known for having indulged in some substances back in the day, and they talk about that song and how they cut it, but they cut it, and it's of course one long live cut, and they finished, and Phil's like immediately says, "Do we need to go again?" I mean, after that drum performance that you hear on the studio record, Phil's like, "I'll do it again right now." So I have a feeling he might have been under the influence of something speedy that day. And the other thing about Phil, and I think you already know this, Ed, as a drummer, he plays with a lighter stick in his right hand than he does in his left. So his left hand is whacking the hell out of the snare.
I'd never known that before until you told me.
Yeah, but he plays with a lighter, a different. Are they called gauges? I don't know what drumsticks are called.
Yeah, I'll be using 5B, so he probably had like a 5B and a 5A or something.
Yeah, something like that.
A little bit smaller.
Right.
Shorter or whatever.
Yeah. So he plays with a lighter stick in his right hand than he does in his left. You don't notice it, I don't think, on any of his fills or anything, but I mean, I'm sure that's what makes him able to, do the hi-hat work that he does. And speaking of hi-hat work, Chris Slade, when he was playing with the band live, they sped everything up. Now, I'm not blaming Chris Slade for that. I mean, that's the whole band. Lord knows, Malcolm and Cliff are metronomes themselves. So, after the first show with Chris Slade, if they thought it was too fast, they would have come up and said, "Hey, Chris, let's, slow it down some." Plus, he doesn't start every song, so you can't blame everything on them. I know a lot of people do, but you can't blame everything on Chris Slade. But the studio record that he recorded with them, Razor's Edge, I mean, it features one of the quickest hi-hat beats that I've ever heard them do. It's, "Let There Be Rock," yeah, that's up there. The song "Rocker," that's up there, but I think he's playing quarters on the hi-hat on that one. Phil is. But there's a song on Razor's Edge called "Fire Your Guns," and geez, Lord, that hi-hat work is speedy.
Yeah, I know. That's one of the songs y'all been trying to get me to learn, and it's like, eventually I'm going to get there, but, I have a tendency to play a little stiff when I get faster like that, so I'm trying to work on, the the way that my wrist works on the hi-hat with the stick. And it's like if I position my stick or my arm right, I can get through it and kind of fake my way through certain parts or add a little bit more swing to it rather than just a straight up like a Slayer beat or something. It's not going to be that fast, but I can get my way through it. But it's just, muscle memory is all it is.
Yeah, and it's the wrist. I've seen drummers that play with their whole forearm. They move their whole arm when they're playing, and that's not good. That's not what you do. It's you got to have a quick wrist to be able to do that. And one thing about Chris Slade and on the song "Fire Your Guns," he's got a hi-hat that's mounted over to his right instead of crossing his arms with the hi-hat on his left and the snare kind of between his legs like every drummer in the universe does. He's got I don't know if he's got two sets of hi-hats, but he's got a set of hi-hats kind of over to the right, so his arm can be pretty much extended. And I wonder if that makes it easier on his wrist to be able to play that fast. So he's a great drummer anyway. I mean, he goes all the way back to the early 60s. He played with Manfred Mann, and he played with Tom Jones and whoever, Uriah Heep, and all these different bands that he played with. But that's a quick beat. Bottom line, that's a quick beat, and Chris Slade nails it.
I've actually tried that before, putting the hi-hat, because I'm right-handed, so I crossed also. But having it on the right side over by floor tom, it is a little bit easier because you don't have to use your shoulder muscle to cross your arm.
Yeah.
You can just have it over here on this side, and it's a lot easier. You can get into it, not have to worry about doing the extra muscle memory to cross your arm. It is a lot easier on some things, on faster things, but on slower things, keeping it over on the left side where I'm used to having it it's easier to do that way.
Yeah. Yeah. We started off this episode talking about the blues influence on AC/DC, and it's, very prominent. You can hear it in every song, especially with Angus's soloing. He's got that vibrato too. He's got a really wide vibrato, and it's really nice. I mean, you hear a lot of guitar players that play and they just wiggle the hell out of it. It's not even. It's not in tempo with the song, which is an odd thing. It's just weird how people just think wiggling the string is vibrato. It's not. You're supposed to be, in rhythm with the song. And Angus has that in spades. But I want to go on to another thing that's kind of funny about AC/DC is as much as they have all the classic hard rock riffs, things like TNT and Sin City and, Highway to Hell, things that are not, you can't listen to that and go, oh, that's a blues song. They have also written songs that not influenced. I don't think they're that influenced by this, but they have written songs that almost cross over into sort of a pop feel. I mean, you've got a song like Money Talks. You've got a song like You Shook Me All Night Long. Those songs almost have a popish kind of feel to them.
They're almost like a radio-ready song.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think that maybe, and especially around the Razor's Edge time, I think that might have been, I hate to say that they considered it because AC/DC's always been their own thing, and they haven't really tried to emulate any trends or anything. And they didn't on that album. But I think they are aware when they come up with a riff, they can hear it and go, this is a crowd pleaser. This is a sing along. This is a chorus that everybody's going to get immediately. I think you'd have to be oblivious not to hear when one of them came up. When Angus came up with the first riff to Money Talks, they must have both their ears stood up and went, wait a minute, yeah. Let's write something around that. And then it's a very simple song. It's just G, C, and D on the guitar. It couldn't be any easier. But it comes in and it's a big hit, and it's kind of a poppy type of song. Right. And you could go all the way back. You can go all the way back. They've had some touches like that. They had a song, lyrically, this is not a song that you're going to probably get on the radio, but on the Dirty Deeds album, they had a song called "Love at First Feel." It's poppy as hell. It's just a straight up pop chord progression, melody, and everything. It's just. It works as a pop song. And then moving on from there to Powerage, they had that album recorded and then decided to put the song Rock and Roll Damnation on there because they didn't think they had a strong enough single from Powerage. And, Rock and Roll Damnation was kind of a hit in Europe. It wasn't much in the United States, but it was kind of a big song in Europe, and they still play it to this day.
Yeah, I was going to say another song that recently just came out from the newest album. This album right here, Power Up, Through the Mist of Time.
Oh yeah, for
that
sure.
That song I think it's probably my favorite off of that album. It's got a really good pop feel to it, and it's not your typical AC/DC song. It's just,
I would call that. I mean, people go back and listen to the song I mentioned earlier when we were talking about the blues stuff, "Ride On," which is a very, very slow, like I said, ZZ Top, Jesus Just Left Chicago kind of feel to it. And people talk about certain AC/DC songs as not sounding like AC/DC songs. The Mist of Time, that's definitely one of those songs that if you didn't hear Brian Johnson singing it, you might not know who it was just hearing the music. It's got such a the very first intro guitar lick is very poppy, very hooky.
What threw me off on that song was the drum beat, the intro drum beat that Phil does. I'm like, he doesn't do that on any song.
No, man.
Because it's just, I mean, he's gotten pretty intricate on the album For Those About to Rock, but that's probably the extent of it.
Right.
And then you get to Power Up and you hear this track and it's like, what is he doing? That's pretty cool.
I wonder how long they,
when you hit the snare on the upbeat of 3, that's not normal 2 and 4.
No,
who does that?
That's not a Phil thing for sure.
No, not at all.
No, that's AC/DC's progressive rock song.
Yeah.
I gotta wonder. Yeah, I wonder. Because Angus has said that all of those songs were things riffs that he had, laying around that he and Malcolm had worked on prior to Malcolm's death. And I wonder if that's one that Malcolm, they might have had that around for the last 15 years, and Malcolm kept saying, nope. No, that's not going on the record, man. And he might have said that and said that and said that, and finally Angus goes, not only is it going on the record this time, but it's going to be a song about him. No, I like it. I think the lyrical content is good. I think that Angus is definitely saluting his brother on that one. And everybody thought that when it came in, everybody kind of thought that song was a salute to Malcolm, but it kind of remained a mystery until the video came out. And when the video came out, you went, it's definitely a little salute to Malcolm.
Yeah, and also Bond, too, because Bond appears. They show Bond in there, too.
Absolutely true, yeah. You got to hand it to, Stevie for taking over from Malcolm. You got to hand it to Brian for taking over from Bond because, I mean, if you go back to the beginning, it's Malcolm's band. Malcolm, he's the boss. And there's nobody more visible and more in the public eye than the singer. And well, I guess in AC/DC's case, you could definitely say Angus was more as much or more the front man than Bond was. I would say that back in the day when Bond was living, I think they were about even as far as their entertainment value on stage. Bond had a presence, man, like no other. And of course his lyrics were fan-damn-tastic, and his voice was, if you don't like it, that's fine, but it was unique. I remember the story of when they, were getting ready to record with Mutt Lange on Highway to Hell, and Bond comes sauntering into the room, and he's talking to Mutt Lange about his vocals, and he said, I've been told that my voice sounds like a weasel in heat. I hope you can work with that. And, and Mutt Lange, to his credit, was just like, let's have at it, man. And you got what you got. If you listen to Highway to Hell, there's all sorts of, there's harmonies on the choruses instead of just gang vocals, which they had some harmonies in the past. I'm not going to take that away from them, but there's harmonies on the choruses. There's different pieces that cut in and out. There's like almost like a flange effect or a chorus effect or something on Bond's voice on Night Prowler and on, I think it's on Girls Got Rhythm. Maybe you can hear a little bit of an effect on the lead vocal on there. But Mutt did him proud, man. Did the whole band proud. Oh, definitely.
Yeah, Mutt's put his stamp on a lot of bands.
Yeah, and that was early days though. He wasn't the famous guy that he became. That was one of the albums that put him on the map.
Yeah.
If you can do that for that band of knuckleheads, imagine what you can do for somebody that will actually listen to you a little bit.
That's right.
But they had started that album. They had recorded a lot of it. They They did it with Eddie Kramer, who had done Jimi Hendrix. That was the original producer for Highway to Hell, and they recorded some tracks with it, and they didn't like the sound of it. They didn't like Eddie Kramer's input, whatever he was saying to do with the songs. They didn't like that. And I know that one thing, I can't remember if it was Eddie Kramer's idea or somebody from the record company or their manager at the time or who, but they wanted them to do a cover of Gimme Some Lovin', the Spencer Davis song that, Gimme Some Lovin', that song. They wanted them to cover that, and they were adamant. They were like, hell to the no, and by the way, Eddie Kramer, you're fired. So they ended up getting, Mutt Lange, who was a relatively unknown guy at the time, and it worked out, just fine, and obviously it worked out enough for them to use him, 2 more times on Back in Black and For Those About to Rock, and boy, what a string of 3 records those are. I mean, the production on all 3 of them is vastly different. It's kind of, they're a little bit modernized from Power Age and Let There Be Rock to Highway to Hell. It's a little bit cleaned up, a little bit different sound. Drums sound different. The guitars are kind of nice and fat. Back in Black, is a masterpiece. The drums sound a certain way. And then on For Those About to Rock, everything got huge. The bass sounds huge. The drums sound huge. The vocals sound huge.
The snare drum on For Those About to Rock pops. It sounds so good.
It is, and I mean this in the most literal way. It's a cannon. Yeah. I mean, that drum sound on For Those About to Rock, they never had anything like that before or since. And it's funny that it's the same producer for Highway to Hell, Back in Black, and For Those About to Rock. And the guitars sound different on all 3, and the drums sound different on all 3. But the vocals just got better and better. I mean, they definitely, they were growing as a band at that time. And the thing that you don't think about, you think about AC/DC on Highway to Hell and Back in Black and For Those About to Rock, you think that they were a mature band by then because they'd already had 4 or 5 records before that. But they were all still in their dang 20s, man. I mean, in 1979, what would that have made? That would have made Malcolm 24, and Angus would have been 23.
Right.
And they wrote all those songs on Highway to Hell, and they, I tell you, man, it's amazing what those guys came up with when they were young and hungry like that. I mean, Bon was the old man of the band. He was, at the time that Highway to Hell came in, he was 32, and that was old.
All right. Well, I think we're going to wrap up this episode now, and we appreciate you sticking around and listening to us. We are on Stitcher, Amazon Music, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and also on YouTube. So join us next time for more AC/DC talk. We are For Those About to Talk, the AC/DC podcast. For Those About to Talk, the AC/DC podcast has been produced and hosted by Eddie Payne, along with co-host Tommy Pearson. Show intro voiceover by Jerry James. If you enjoyed today's podcast, follow us on Facebook at the AC/DC podcast. Also on Instagram at For Those About to Talk, the AC/DC podcast. For Those About to Talk, the AC/DC podcast is on the following platforms: Stitcher, Google Podcast, Spotify, and Amazon Music. Just search For Those About to Talk, the AC/DC podcast. For video of today's podcast, please join us on YouTube. Just search For Those About to Talk, the AC/DC podcast. Thank you for listening and watching. We hope you'll join us again soon.